Very good morning to all of you and Jai Hind. A very warm welcome to keynote speaker Rotarian Vikram Puri today. Uh, it's in fact now a fact that this inviting our own Riversiders as a keynote speaker, it is bringing two things. One is know your Riversider. Second is our Riversiders are not less than the speakers to whom we are inviting. So proudly, I am presenting uh, Rotarian Bikram Puri for today's keynote speaker. Before that, there are two announcements. One is we are proud to have Umeshji and Radha. Umeshji has donated 50,000. You all know for the COVID relief project. And Radhaji has also donated 21,000. That has been credited in the account. Check is ready. Now, I will, in fact, I'm in touch with the group captain, Ashwini Kumar Bhaku. So that check will be delivered maybe today, maybe today itself. So that's a thing. So thank you, Umeshji, thank you, Radhaji, for your good heart, divine heart, generosity. Keep it up. There is another project. In fact, if you remember that Rakesh has taken lead, and I had been in touch with Jignesh Patel, and he has sent the proposal for 2 months. And I have shared individually to some of you and in group also. That requires funding. So, and for 1 lakh, it is, for 1 month, it is 4 lakh something. And for 2 months, it is 8 lakh something. Exactly, I don't remember. So, but in that process, it's a kind of, PPP model. It's totally outsourcing, and it is with the proper permission of the PMC. So we can work out on that. The only thing is, I will request all the members if they can connect with some of the corporates and bring the corporate social responsibility fund. So initially, I talked to Rakeshji, and he is okay for 3 months. We are looking for 3 months. If the amount is available, we can start from 1st of May or whatsoever. That's not a problem. So that is the announcement part. Now, not taking much time because we are very eager to listen today to Vikram Puri. So I will invite Rotarian Prerna Gaikwad for secretariat announcement. So over to Prerna.
Thank you, Colonel. Good morning once again, everyone. We have Ruchin and Shikha Gupta's wedding anniversary tomorrow on the 29th, and 2nd May is and Dr. Uma Ganesh's birthday. So here's wishing them in advance from all of us. That's all the announcements from me. Thank you. Back to you, Colonel.
Prerna, today is Pooja
Thank you.
Kherasani's birthday.
Thank you
Today,
very much.
okay, I didn't have that in the list. Sorry. Happy birthday to Pooja too.
Thank you, Prerna. Now, again, I will invite Rotarian Prerna Gaikwad to introduce and welcome Rotarian Vikram Puri. So over to Prerna Gaikwad.
I don't think our speaker for today needs any introduction. All of us have known him for a very long time. Most of you all way, way more than me. But here's just a brief introduction to our speaker for today. Vikram Puri is an entrepreneur, road safety evangelist, and passionate Rotarian. In his career spanning over 30 years, he has run engineering infra companies, building large industrial buildings, bridges, and tunnels on the famous Konkan Railway, technology businesses, consulting, and consumer product companies. He has created technology solutions used by organizations like the Indian Air Force, DRDO, British Petroleum, Hindustan Lever, and various governments. His innovations have so far resulted in filing 5 patents, ranging from IoT devices to a multidimensional drone addressing system, and even a computational algorithm for big data analytics that claims to be faster than the patented solution by IBM. He also consults on varied subjects that range from marketing and finance to entrepreneurship and strategy. While running his own technology company, he is the president and CEO of an 800 crore industrial group based in Pune in manufacturing, packaging, and technology. He is a passionate free thinker, open source evangelist who advises and serves on the boards of committees of renowned nonprofits like the KEM Hospital, the MCCIA, FICCI, and Rotary. A charming, witty, and wise Vikramaditya of our club. Here's to you, Mr. Vikram Puri. Please go ahead.
Thank you. But that last bit, I don't know where that came from. I definitely didn't put it there myself.
A little from our side, what we.
All right. Thank you very much. You know, when I heard that for a couple of minutes, I thought there was somebody else who's going to be the speaker here today. So, you know, the topic today is talking about data, the internet, and freedom of speech, how they're all interrelated and correlated, and in fact, codependent. The internet has emerged as the lingua franca of the world. You know, it's a universal language, irrespective of actual language. It's a universal medium to communicate, and so-called social media. Most of that media isn't very social these days, but so-called social media has become a complete a bridge that that actually covered a divide that we thought could never be bridged, you know, between countries, between people, and in fact between adversaries. So for the first time, people of a particular country or a region or a ethnicity have been able to confront people of another region or ethnicity and actually bring out their best, and most of the time their worst in that confrontation. So before we go into how the internet has evolved in terms of speech and communication, I think it's important for us to understand what it's all about. How does our information become available to somebody else to allow them to either compliment or offend, or simply comment on events that are far away from them at the time. A huge number of the mobile phones in the world run on the Android operating system, and that Android operating system is owned by Google. It's an open source system, which basically means that the source code is in the public domain and anyone can read it, can modify it, can use it the way they want. Which is why there are so many mobile phone manufacturers who take that open source software and use that as the operating system to run their phones. And that's why Android phones are cheaper than the branded Apple. Apple is also an operating system, but it's proprietary. So the code isn't open. No one else can use it except Apple. And these two operating systems actually follow actually demonstrate the huge difference between two thoughts on the internet: proprietary and open source. Both are extremely successful. But even Apple, while keeping all its source code proprietary, meaning that it doesn't disclose its software source code, is quickly realizing that unless it provides functional applications the way Android does or the way Google does, it's not, they're not going to be able to compete. Although Apple has this strange position in the market that whenever they price something higher than what it was previously, they generate more demand. They are the only consumer company in the world that seems to be able to do this. We use a lot of apps on our phones, and some of those apps are Truecaller, Gmail, we use WhatsApp, lots of us use Facebook. All of these are free. In fact, you cannot use an Android phone unless you have a Google account. So that is the hook that that Google gets for allowing you to use their open source systems. So you don't get access to the App Store, the Play Store. So you really have to be a nerd to be able to use the Android operating system without using a Google account. And most people can't do that So the easiest option is to use you register with Gmail and you start using an Android phone. And the thing about Gmail or Google or anything to do with Google is that all of these things that are supposedly free are actually aren't, in the sense that Google has to extract its pound of flesh in order to provide you this world-class, really high quality service. Gmail is probably one of the best email solutions in the world, whether for a business or whether for personal use. In fact, in my opinion, it's undoubtedly the best. The same thing applies to WhatsApp in terms of ease of use, ability to easily adapt and adopt new features in the app. WhatsApp is outstanding. Facebook, of course, has pervaded our society to the extent that every person on the street knows how to use Facebook. Even the person who doesn't know how to book a gas cylinder online can use Facebook. Now, what's happening with all of these apps, and especially apps like Truecaller, is that they're actually gathering data in order to use it at some point in time, because there is no free lunch. Google uses your data to show you advertisements, and a lot of their revenue is based on advertisements. It's only now in the recent years that Google's revenues are based on cloud services and email services, which people have started paying for. But traditionally, advertisement has been the main source of revenue for all of these free apps and services. And the one way to deliver effective advertising is to be able to profile your customer. There is no point in delivering an advertisement for a Mercedes-Benz to a person who has an income of 20,000 rupees a month. So in order to deliver the right ad to the right person, they need to profile you. And how do they do that? Google, for sure, if you open your Gmail and you go to the search box and you type a search word to search your mail for any word in that mail, and you can try it. It even searches the attachments. So if you have a PDF attachment, a 50-page document that came to you in an email, and you remember a phrase out of the document and you type it in your search box in Gmail, it will pop up that document. So what Google does is actually it reads every single email that you are sending, every attachment that is attached to that email, and indexes it. Because no computers can take the strain of millions of people running searches live on the system all the time. So what it does is it indexes every part of your email, every part of your document, and then stores it in an easy to reference, ready lookup kind of table. And when you type in a word, it simply goes to that place in the table and identifies which emails in your whole mailbox contain that word and pops those up in the search. It doesn't actually go and search your email. So the net result is that if you're using Chrome, for example, which is also a Google product, now you're logged in with your Google account, you're using Chrome, you're opening your Gmail, all of those indexes are available, and Google will assure you that no human being will read your email, no one will have access to it. All that is probably true. But today, a human being is inefficient when it comes to reading huge amounts of data. It's the machine which is much more capable and much more competent. And the machine's ability to process, index, and use the data at the right time is so obvious and evident that when you search for a pair of shoes online, a particular pair of shoes, or you write to somebody in an email saying that I like this product, and suddenly you start seeing ads on your mobile phone, on your computer for that product or related products, you know that something is happening in the background that is allowing the advertiser to know what your profile is, that you are interested in a particular kind of product, and push it to you. Now, most people will say, and lots of my friends say that, so what? So what? I don't care if they know what product I like. I don't care if they know what car I drive. But the fact of the matter is that human beings are uh, difficult to influence if you have nothing in common with them, and very easy to influence if you have lots in common with them. And that shows up in normal everyday conversations. How you connect to somebody who's from your own country or from your own town, or how you connect with somebody who's from your own company, or even on an international holiday, for example, people who are traveling from and to the same destination, and how they strike up conversations or staying in the same hotel. These similarities actually create a sense of confidence and faith. And that's what artificial intelligence does. It starts to create a sense of confidence and faith, which is why when somebody posts a message on WhatsApp on a group that take for example our Riverside group, the tendency to regard, whether you like it or not, the tendency to regard its authenticity is much, much higher than to just read it in the newspaper or hear it on TV. So it's your familiarity and your proximity to the prompt that actually allows you to feel confident. And this is exactly what happens when your profile, when your data is made available to these super advertisers, these super sellers. And when I say super advertisers and super sellers, I'm not only talking about products and services and businesses. I'm talking about politics. I'm talking about religion. I'm talking about hateful, speech. I'm talking about dissent. I'm talking about all of those things, because in every one of those verticals, the that leader or that person who's actually doing this needs to make a sale. He has to sell something to you. Either he has to sell you an idea, or he sell you a product, or he has to sell you some a feeling. So if you look at religion, for example, they're selling you salvation. I mean, any religion in the world, whether it is a Western one or an Eastern one or an Indian one, is selling moksha or salvation or heaven as the final destination. And the closer the examples are to you and to your heart, the greater is your feeling of is your good feel, and your the higher is your self-confidence as they keep building it up. And the same thing applies for politics, applies to politics. So what happens when you start using these products? When I say products, I mean these applications. All of these companies are picking up your habits and your profiles. For example, they would know when you wake up in the morning and what time you prefer to go to sleep. They know what your mood is better than the members of your family. They know when you are most receptive, because they have a track record of when they showed you an ad and when you actually clicked on it. So do you tend to do that more in the morning or more in the evening or more on a Sunday? And they actually target all of those things and in fact prey on you. We all know that we are very susceptible when we are the most vulnerable. And if somebody wants, if a friend wants something from you, or you want to get something from somebody, maybe a person in authority, you always choose the best time, and often their assistants and the the people who surround them will advise you on what's the best time, and often they say that now is not a good time. You should come in the evening, or you should call him in the morning, and he'll be the most receptive at that time. Now, this is because of their years of proximity and association with that person. But artificial intelligence picks that up instantly. And when I say instantly, it needs data to pick it up, but it's exponentially faster than a human being. So what's happened is that all of these systems have created profiles of you, and they know what you do, what you buy, and based on the kind of discussion that you have on Facebook or on Twitter, they are able to actually work out whether you really own a Mercedes-Benz, or whether you're a teenager who's talking about the great car that he saw on the street. And this profiling is becoming more and more accurate because it's getting validated. So every time they pick somebody to buy a particular product, and that person actually goes and buys that product, that their intelligence gets validated, their analytics gets validated, their assumptions get validated. And the more validations they have, the more focused that profile becomes, and the greater is their ability to target your mind, which is what they are doing finally. They're influencing your thought. This is what political parties have quickly cottoned on to. And we've seen in the US elections, in the Indian elections, how political parties have used the internet very smartly, very effectively, and they have been able to actually focus information. They've been able to provide those confidence building prompts at the most vulnerable times of their electorate, and changed their way of thinking, which is not a bad thing, because finally political electioneering is all about that, about changing your way of thinking. And I'm not sure, I'm not going to talk about whether it's ethically correct or ethically incorrect to do it. My job here, or my goal here, is to just make you aware of it, and you need to take the call, whether you feel that this is something that you need to watch out for, or you feel this is absolutely okay. The last time this happened without technology was in the 1930s, when an entire people were completely convinced, and now the word is brainwashed, but at that time they were made into nationalists and patriots. I'm speaking of Germany. That country did all of this without technology. And in order to get everybody on the same page, so to speak, in the sense that if you want to influence a vast majority of people, as I said, you need to profile them. Now, because they didn't have technology and they couldn't profile them, they militarized them. And by militarizing people, you also channel thought, behavior, and reaction. They managed to convince the entire population that a particular kind of people, simply because of the way they looked, spoke, or prayed, weren't fit to be humans. And strange as it may sound today, an entire people believed that, much to their subsequent shame and regret. But what is happening today with technology is that this whole database is no longer now available only to sellers of a product or promoters of a particular line of thought. Data has become like, it's become, you can buy and sell it like a Kalashnikov. And the problem is, it works just like a Kalashnikov. A few rounds fired locally have sent shock waves globally. And what happens with this data to you and me personally is that without realizing it, we start conforming to those thought prompts that are being sent to us on a daily basis. And anybody can try this. If you tell somebody enough times to do something, that person starts to do it automatically. Your habit repeating makes it a habit, and habits become permanent, and then they become behavior. So data is used to influence behavior. We've effectively used data to influence driving behavior. For example, you heard that I stand for road safety, and we've seen that we could use driver behavior data to actually predict and forecast which driver is likely to have an accident in the next 3 months. And we were able to do this validate it with back testing, and that, you know, the results of that back testing were so strong that our customers actually took that process and propagated it across the country in commercial vehicle transportation. That's not to say that it was never wrong or that it was the best, but what I'm trying to say is that a clear profile definitely allows you to influence behavior. Donald Trump used that very effectively in the United States. In India, the BJP has used it very effectively. Again, I'm not going into what's wrong or right, because we, the people, chose to be influenced, and we, the people, can choose not to be. But I'm talking about the power of data. Now, how does this connect to you as an individual? What can you do about it? Because you got to use Gmail, right? You've got to use your mobile phone. So let's look at some of the apps that we are using. And let me start with my, favorite target, that is Truecaller. Now, I don't normally give an opinion like this, but this one, in my opinion, is probably the worst, most damaging product that you could use. And unfortunately, the fact that I don't use it doesn't mean that I will be protected from it. The problem with Truecaller is that your entire phone book is uploaded to the Truecaller app provider. He owns that database. And that is why when you make a call, there is a live lookup happening, which tells you the name of the person who's either calling you or the one you're calling. Now, how has this been used effectively? And this is without deliberate misuse of data. One obvious angle is that the company itself can take that database and they can sell it to various companies, countries, or organizations, and they can use that data. That is an obvious one. But here's how an ordinary individual can use that database and how it's being used in India today. Lots of the espionage recruitment by the Pakistani intelligence agencies in the Indian Armed Forces is happening because of Truecaller. The moment you get your hands on a list of mobile numbers in India and you start dialing, and money is no object, you start dialing, you don't even need a response from the other party. So even the connected call cost doesn't take place. The name of the called party is shown up. And most of us, for example, I save Colonel Mishra's name as Colonel K.C. Mishra. Now, if I was using Truecaller, the Truecaller database would be updated with Colonel Mishra's name as Colonel K.C. Mishra. If his son saves it or his daughter saves it as Dad, it would also be Dad. And it's possible for somebody to analyze that data and actually trace a complete genealogy. But in India, ordinary Jawans and JCOs have been recruited by first identifying them, their ranks, and then engaging them in conversations with women who would their profile picture is easy to get. So a very attractive profile picture, and a conversation starts, and 1 or 2 months down the line, gifts are exchanged and expensive gifts are given, and then the whole connect takes place, and data information actually starts changing hands. This is just one example of how Truecaller works. But imagine that if there was a Chinese company that wanted to sell aphrodisiacs in India, and they have access to the Truecaller list. There are two markets there. One is for the the company that the person who actually wants to buy, and the other person who doesn't want to buy but is embarrassed by having his name publicly linked with a request or a demand for an aphrodisiac. So both make money for companies, and this is a variation of this is how ransomware came into being. The Maharashtra State Transport Corporation invested 200 crores, I think, in an ERP system, and they did not put in enough checks. So they were hit, sorry, the MIDC, I think, or the MSRTC, I may be mistaken, one of the two. And they were hit by a ransomware attack. And the attacker is demanding 500 crore rupees. And, most people laughed at that demand and said, forget it, we'll just delete the data and we'll reinstall. And they found that they couldn't do that because that ransomware locked up their backup, locked up the main servers. And the cost of a new ERP system to be installed and implemented is close to 500 crores for that organization. It's still not working. There is no way that a government in India, at least, is going to pay a ransom demand of 500 crores for this kind of attack, but they're not able to find a solution. So therefore, it's all status quo. If your phone is attacked with ransomware, what is it worth to you to get it opened? Would you pay 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees? Because that's the level of ransomware that is available for free on the internet. And all somebody has to do is send you a message or a WhatsApp post, especially WhatsApp, because WhatsApp allows execution of code within the app. For example, when you open a picture, that picture is actually downloaded and displayed. So that is execution. And that also allows malware to get into your phone. So if you are using Truecaller, you're actually exposing me, because if somebody has seen this video and they think that I'm, somebody who can pay ransomware to get his phone unlocked, they will probably attack my phone, because now they know who Vikram Puri is and they can probably link a name and a number, and all he has to do is just send me a WhatsApp message. And if I'm foolish enough to open it, or if I'm even more foolish and I have set my WhatsApp to automatically download pictures and images and video, like 99% of the population, then that code will get executed automatically. It won't even ask. So I won't even get the chance to look at it and say, oh, this is an unrecognized number. Do I really want to see this video, or do I really want to download this image? It'll just do it. Come back to Google. Gmail uses various kinds of security, great security, but none of us use it. Gmail has two-tier security. It has an OTP type of security. It has a unique, because it's Google, because Google owns Android. So on an Android phone, you actually don't even need an OTP. Your phone directly connects to your Google account and actually sends you a OTP-like code, which you can enter on, which you can select on your phone. So it's instant and easy to log into your Gmail account securely. But we don't do that. We have passwords like Vikram 1968, which is the year of my birth, or we will have a password like ABC 357, which number correlates to either my home or my office or my car or something like that. And those are, by the way, are the easiest ones to crack. And once a hacker gets into your...
How did you know my password?
Once a hacker gets into your Google account, he plays havoc. He is just as smart as an artificial intelligence engine. He goes through your email. He realizes who the people are with whom you're communicating, and he estimates their commercial or financial ability, and he starts sending them messages that can range from business-like to plaintive cries for help. And many people I know personally, people who are heading technology companies, people who are heading manufacturing businesses, have actually sent money to their so-called friends to the account details sent to them in an email from their friends saying, I'm stuck in Kuala Lumpur, my wallet has been picked, my pocket has been picked, and my passport has been lost. Can you quickly wire me $1,000 or $2,000? And people have done that. The latest scam, and this comes from hacking into your Google account, is where your customers start receiving emails saying, please be advised that my NEFT and RTGS account details have changed. And they put in a new account ID, a new account number, and your next payment, and that's all that works, only that one payment, because by the time the payment happens, then 2 or 3 days go by, and then you call up your customer and say, hey, listen, you haven't, what's happened, you haven't paid, and he says, I did, and then the whole thing unravels. But by that time, you lost a lot of money. So almost everything hinges around Google, because when you go to Facebook, when you go to Zoom, when you go to any of the apps that you normally use, you get that option which says create a new user ID or password, or log in with your Google account. Because Google offers this other great free service called single sign-on. So single sign-on basically means that if you have a Google account and a Google password, you don't need an account and password for any other. Whenever you see that login with your Google account, that usually means that that application or software provider has connected to Google, and he says that whoever can log into Google with any Gmail account can log into me or to my software. So lots of us use that to log into Zoom. Lots of us use that to log into, some people, lots of people, me included, use the mobile phone for banking. And unless you're careful, you are going to be in serious trouble if anyone gets access to your Google account. So that Google account now has become like your passkey to everything. If I have access to your Google account, I can get into anything. Because remember, even if you have not connected with your Google account or not logged in with your Google account, when that question came up to say, please enter your email ID so that we can send you a reset password, you put in your Gmail ID. So anyone who has access to your Google account, he can go to any account you have, whether it's your bank or anything else, and say reset, and instantly a reset link appears in your Gmail. Now, at the start of this conversation, I said that if you go and use the search feature in Gmail, you will realize that everything in Gmail is being indexed. When you use Paytm to pay on your mobile phone, and it says OTP sent, and the app that you're using to pay says automatically reading OTP, and the OTP automatically appears on your screen. So what is happening? That software, which was installed by somebody else, has been authorized by you to read your SMS messages. And that software has the intelligence to know that an SMS message contains, this next SMS message contains an OTP. It extracts that OTP from the SMS message and pops it into that app. Now imagine if I were to send you a video on WhatsApp from an unknown number, and your phone is set to automatically download videos, and you open the video and you find either it's a mundane video, or most of the time it's a pornographic video, because then people tend to look at it for 5 or 6 seconds, which is the time that the background code needs to run to properly execute. So you look at it for 5-6 seconds and that code executes. Now what's happened is that your phone has installed another OTP reader, just like the one that your ICICI Bank installed or Paytm installed, and it can now send OTPs. So your next bank account hacking is going to be very simple. You will receive an OTP and you'll say, oh, why did I get it? Somebody must be trying to access my bank account, which is true. And you do nothing. You know how to be safe. So you don't share the OTP with anyone. You don't even tell the bank when you call them that, this is the OTP. You just say, I have received an OTP. You're smart. You know all of those things. But that crook has already received that OTP. It's been transmitted to him. The point I'm trying to make is that for most of us, our lives are beginning to revolve around Google. And, last year when we were sitting in the lockdown and I had very little to do, I wrote an article called The Day I Sold My Soul to Google. And when I started researching that, I realized that there are so many things in our everyday life that are connected to our Google accounts without even realizing it. Our bank accounts, our bank statements, everybody uses Google. Nobody uses a company ID. Nobody uses a corporate ID simply because the mail service is not good enough. Even if we use a company ID, we are using Google Apps and our company domain linked to Google Apps, like we have for Rotary Riverside, for example. The background is Google. So here is this giant that has understood who you are, what your behavior is. A Facebook is looking at what you say in public and creating profiles of you. It's able to target news, advertisements, and materials to the extent that it changes the way you vote or it changes the way you pray. This particular, this particular control, or this string that controls your lives or our lives is very gently being, wound by Google. And I don't think they intend to yank it or anything like that. But the big fear is that if America were to go the way of China when it comes to information and freedom. So recently in America, Apple refused to unlock an Apple phone of a terrorist, even when asked to do that by the FBI, even when a court ordered it. They contested that order in court and they actually won there, and the government chose not to appeal. But I don't see that happening in India. I don't see that happening in China. I don't see that happening in any other country. I think in most other countries, there will be this, huge public pressure, which will say, what the hell? There is no secrecy. The guy is a terrorist. You need to open his phone. But Apple was making a point there about freedom there, that we don't care who he is and what he's accused of. This is something that we will not give you. You get the password from him, but we will not break it for you. We will not decrypt it for you. WhatsApp did that to the UAE, and they haven't found a solution for it yet, except that they banned WhatsApp calls within the UAE. So you can't now make a WhatsApp voice call if you have a UAE number because WhatsApp refused to share encryption codes for the simple reason that they said that we don't have encryption codes. They're generated for every session. So there is no encryption, single encryption or decryption key that can be shared. India is not so strong in its defense of free speech. So India has, in fact, threatened to jail Twitter employees if certain Twitter posts are not pulled down. And under that pressure, in fact, Twitter has started pulling down posts which are critical of the government, even as late as last week, of their handling of the COVID situation. So if you criticize the government now on Twitter, there is a government order which says that that post will be pulled down, and Twitter communicates it that way too. Which brings me to the last couple of minutes in my talk today. What does all of this have to do with the freedom of speech, and why is it important? So we in India, especially in India, but in all other countries as well, freedom of speech has varying degrees of freedom and maturity. The problem with freedom of speech is that, and that is the excuse that most use to suppress it also, is that it gives you the right to offend. So you can say something offensive or insulting about somebody and call it freedom of speech. And that also allows the other party, usually the one in authority or in power, to say that this is not on, you can't say anything that hurts the sentiments of other people, which is a favorite phrase we use in India. In the United States, it's it's different. In other countries, it's different. And it's used to pass orders and laws that tend to suppress that freedom of speech mainly on these grounds, that either you're insulting a national symbol or a national hero or a head of state, and the exceptions to the freedom of speech, at least in India, are pretty clear. If your speech is likely to affect our relationship, India's relationship with another country, your freedom is restricted. If your expression or speech is likely to result in the disclosure of an official secret, your speech is restricted. If your and this one is a little loose, if your speech is likely to result in promoting enmity and hatred between two groups of people, your speech is restricted. Now the problem with these restrictions is that you can use any word, anything to define it as insulting or provocative. And this actually happens. This is what really happens. So any kind of ridicule or sarcasm or even mildly offensive criticism is converted into offense and insult. And the law actually allows someone who is not the offended one, someone who's not the victim, to actually go and initiate a legal process. And that legal process in India, for example, and also in other countries, involves filing a criminal complaint which says that my sensibilities have been offended because Vikram Puri said something about, say, Ganesh Natarajan. And this complaint is not made by Ganesh Natarajan. This complaint is made by Mukesh Malhotra, who's a very good friend, or he reveres Ganesh Natarajan. So he says, this is my, this guy, I really respect him, and how could Vikram say something about him? So therefore, this case. And Ganesh Natarajan is smiling there and saying, listen, I'm not offended. I'm ready to talk to this guy. But that doesn't matter. Vikram Puri will be arrested. And, we've used the same laws that were used to open fire at Jallianwala Bagh, the same laws that were used to pass the crawling order. I don't know if you heard of that in Amritsar. And the underlying reason, which was accepted by the government of the day, was that the people were defiant to my authority. That is what General Dyer said. And it was necessary to teach them a lesson. And it is that same act, the Defense of India Act, that allowed the very same act, Defense of India Act, I think it's 1919 or 1917, that allowed a group of uniformed and armed military personnel to barge into the homes of one of our Rotarians last week, saying that we've come from the nearby Air Force station and we have come here to inspect your home. And they walked in. It's the same law which was used not 10 years ago, not 50 years ago, but last week in Mundwa police station to book a citizen who went and video recorded a policeman saying that he wouldn't do something unless he got a bribe. He was booked under the Official Secrets Act. He was arrested. The judge criticized the police and let him off on bail. But ladies and gentlemen, the problem is, and this is what so every issue has two sides. One is one of them who rationalize what's happening, and the other ones who are vociferously against. So the rationalizers say that, don't worry, the police are misusing it, or the local people are misusing this law, but the courts will never allow it. But in India, ladies and gentlemen, the process is the punishment. You are arrested, you are taken to court, first you're locked up, then you're taken to court. If you are somebody, you or me, we wouldn't be locked up, we would be officially arrested and told to come the next day directly to the court. Other people aren't. They're made to sit there in the police station till they're produced in the court. And then you get bail. Then you fight that case, and finally it falls through because it has no substance. It's not legally valid, but it takes 2-3 years. In those 2-3 years, you can't apply for a passport. You can't extend your passport. If you have a FIR against you, irrespective of whether the case is proceeding or not or whatever, you cannot get a passport unless that judge gives you an NOC. So the point I'm trying to make is that here The internet has become that great arena where anybody can say anything. And I'm saying that it must stay that way. Google now has the ability to actually even influence what we say on social media. They can choose to make it appear higher or lower in their search engines. And Google searches now are the primary source of all information for all of us. So Google can actually decide if Pune should see a certain bit of news right on top when anybody from Pune searches, because your location, your your habits, your behavior, everything is part of your profile. Obama said, laudable efforts to restrict speech often become a tool to silence critics and oppress minorities. The strongest weapon against hateful speech is actually more speech. You need to open it out and allow people to say what they want to say. The right to offend is inherent in the right to criticize. Otherwise, everybody gets offended at anything. Our friend Ganesh Natarajan suddenly realized last week that he was not a patriot because he wouldn't forward a particular post that he didn't agree with. Because the post said that if you are a patriot, you must forward this post. So all those who didn't forward it aren't patriots. Now, my right to offend him by saying that is this is extremely mild. This is very I'm saying it with a smile on my face. But when I really come out with passion and I say, you're not really an Indian if you don't do this or if you don't do that, and you know exactly what I mean when I say don't do this or don't do that. So this whole thing about converting my way or the highway to being nationalist or patriotic is another behavioral tool that the media and the systems use. Salman Rushdie called it the outrage brigade, the outrage industry, where you said something and the media houses would come online and say, the country wants to know, tell me who said it and what are you going to do about it, and so on and so forth. And they fuel this mass hysteria. But all that is happening here is that somebody criticized someone, and all criticism is offensive, irrespective of how mature you are. But when someone criticizes you, and we may say, we may say it all we want, but when we get criticized and we act on that criticism, either react or act, it's pinching you. That's why it's happening. And that pinch is what we call offense, or we convert to offense. That's the same pinch that made Mamta Dee put a college professor in jail for publishing a cartoon. That pinch is the same pinch that made Muslim extremists commit that slaughter because of Charlie Hebdo's cartoons. It's that same pinch that exiled Salman Rushdie to Qatar. He couldn't live in India because he painted a picture of an Indian goddess as he saw her. And all of this is interconnected. It's interrelated. And those in authority tend to constantly evoke and equate dissent and discord with nationalism and patriotism. There was a time when the Shiv Sena was agitating in Bombay, and they were talking about how the army was not being deployed fast enough during the Kargil war and blah blah blah. And I remember one army officer who turned and said, you tell the Shiv Sena to come and serve at Siachen. Sounds good. But the fact of the matter is that who will run the factories, or who will run the railways, or who will run the electricity companies? So everybody has a role to play, and they are no less nationalist or no less patriotic than the other guy. The bus driver is just as patriotic as the guy who stands on the border. He chose to choose that job, and he chose to choose this one. And somewhere in between was a degree of commitment and dedication, which was different in the both of them. Somewhere in between was a degree of difference in opportunity that was available to both of them. That's all. So before I close and open it up for questions, I want you to remember that the right to free speech is not a right which is given to us by anybody. It's an inherent right as a people, as humans. That's our right. Even in our constitution, citizens are not given the right. The constitution says, we the people give to ourselves this constitution. It's only confirming in writing what is an inherent right. It's an absolute right. And that's why in the constitution, this is one of the rights that's called fundamental. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Vikramji. It's a really stunning, mind-blowing, very interesting, and I must say, speechless from very beginning to end. Though time is very less time is left, I think, but I will request Riversiders to please allow me 10 minutes, because without question answer we cannot go. There are so many our friends looking for the question answer. So I would like to invite Sanjay Merchant to moderate this session. Over to Sanjay.
Yeah, good morning everyone again. I have to give it to Ganesh. Midway only he had put up his hand. I hope, Ganesh, you remember your question now.
You know, I'm happy you mentioned that, because my question was going to be completely different. But having heard the last 10 minutes, I have to change my question. So Vikram, your whole speech of 45 minutes reminds me of a Khushwant Singh column that he used to write. It was called With Malice Towards All. So I think I'm so happy that you are equally malicious towards every political party. So nobody can accuse you of bias. And I have a question, Vikram, which is, I mean, it's not even a question, it's a thought. See, if you look at India over the last 2 weeks, I mean, especially with this huge crisis, I mean, initially in Maharashtra, now really Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, starting yesterday. One interesting thing that has happened is this huge kind of, I'm the boss or I'm the hero and nobody should say anything to me, is kind of coming down. It's almost like today in India, we are all equal mortals. We're all equally worried about what's happening to our fellow citizens. And somehow we seem to have become nicer people. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think nothing, there is no greater equalizer than the prospect of death. And, Indians especially we are full of bluster for all kinds of things. That bit about the outrage brigade was very true. And what's happening is that suddenly everybody is being given a sense of their own mortality, and people are realizing that in spite of the fact that I am wealthy, or I have connections, or I am politically connected, or I'm a politician, or an army officer. I have been getting calls from army officers in the last 4 or 5 days, and they're not, they and their relatives who are entitled to go to military hospitals are not getting room in those beds. And this sudden realization that, hey, listen, now this can happen to anybody. There is no longer that, isolation or insulation that we assumed. And that was one thing that the wealthy in India always believed, that if we are well off, we will be insulated from this. We will be uncomfortable. We will be, but we'll be able to, every evening, we'll be able to sip that single malt and talk about it and debate, very intolerantly or tolerantly, whichever way you want. We'll be able to run those very intelligent debates. But this has changed. This has changed. Nobody is, like they said, that nobody is above the reach of the law, but everybody laughed at that because they knew. Here, nobody's out of reach of this disease, and it's no laughing matter. So I think that's a very sobering effect that is had, and you can see it across the board. All the vociferous politicians, the big guys, the people in the who live in the Charles, in the lower income, they are also now very subdued, and they're sort of shocked into they're pondering over now what's going to happen, and the realization that everybody's equal now. So you're absolutely right. I think Umesh wants to say something.
Yeah, Rohit has a question. Vikram?
Why is my video disabled?
Who?
I can't
Enable
answer
it,
that.
Rohit, enable it.
I can't answer that, Rohit.
Vikram, I just removed my Truecaller. Thanks to your speech, my Truecaller is uninstalled.
Yes, but
now it's no
unfortunately,
use, Rohit.
unfortunately, the damage is done. My telephone number, which you have stored in your phone book, has now gone to Truecaller and to millions of other people across the country.
Rohit, now you know the impact which becomes.
How do you undo this damage then?
Minutes of call.
Can I?
Everybody's asking how you undo it. 1 second, Umesh, just 1 second.
Yeah.
Vikram,
Ji.
how do you undo the damage? Everybody's asking.
Well, I don't think there's really any way to undo it, because data is like Aadhaar, for example. When Aadhaar came, they said it will be protected, and I think you all know that I'm a great advocate of not having an Aadhaar number. And in Pondicherry, in this very election, the entire Aadhaar database with locations was used to target voters in the 3 days in the run-up to the actual voting, which is actually in violation of the poll regulations. You can't campaign in the last 2 days or 3 days, but they did it, and no one knew. Nobody knows who's the culprit. Nobody knows how it's happened. And the government, of course, says that no, this is not from the Aadhaar database. And the questions are, how do you know the ward numbers? How do you know who lives where? How are specific SMSs for specific candidates going only to specific regions within the city? So this is only possible with an Aadhaar database, and that was leaked.
Umesh, you have a question?
You can't undo it.
Yeah. Vikram, you have talked about the concept of criticism, deep analysis about the criticism. And I don't know whether you have simplified it or made it more complex, but it was most thought-provoking. I had the similar question to what you have answered just now, that you stated that we are sold our soul to the Google. So suppose I decide to come back from that point and do not want to continue to be sold to the Google. How do I do that? Suppose I decide now, and since the damage has already been done, as I understood, so it will remain forever.
Yes, that's the point I was making in the last question, that once data is leaked or data is acquired or a profile is created, only an assurance that your data will be deleted means nothing, because the number of data backups that exist for any bit of data, not just Google, is limitless. You may think that by deleting your WhatsApp chat or just deleting WhatsApp from your phone solves the problem, but give me 10 minutes and I will go into your Gmail account. Again, it's Google. Go into your Gmail account and I will take out all your WhatsApp chats which you had stored, which are automatically being backed up by your phone without you even knowing it.
So we are immune. We cannot be immune from this virus.
Not at all. You are you have got it, and you need to build your antibodies. That's all. You're already infected.
Yeah, Jailam, last
Thank
question. Yeah, Jailam, last question.
Good morning, Vikram. We are more scared on this internet. You search anything. This is my recent experience. I searched something on internet And now I'm scared to go on internet. Whenever I go on internet, that thing pops up.
Correct.
They will not leave me. I felt that we are trapped humans. So in future, they might tell me, Jailam, you will get this disease because you have these habits. So you have to take this medicine.
Not in the future.
So right now, probably.
Right now, yes. So definitely not in the future, because they know what you're buying to eat. They know what you're ordering on Zomato. They know your weight. They know your height because you're using health apps.
Right. So this is.
So it's not in the future. It's not in the future right here. It's only a question of. How much will. Neeru, I think you're. Neeru, can you please mute a microphone?
Okay.
Yeah, it's only a question of how much will somebody pay today for that data and that behavioral profile. Otherwise, it's already available. Life insurance companies are doing it all the time now. And you know, all that gyan everybody was talking about, that don't make those fake comorbidities to get your vaccine earlier. There were people who were saying that if you just claim that you have diabetes, you'll get the vaccine even if you're not entitled to it because of age. All that is true. All that is true. When you say that I have diabetes and you go and get a vaccine, that insurance company is going to come back to you and going to say that you have bought this policy by misdeclaring your health, and therefore they're not liable to pay. And you know when they're going to say that? When you are dead.
At the time of claim.
Yes, at the time of the claim. So, your data and your profile is extremely, extremely valuable. And all my friends, especially the North Indian variety, because Punjabis tend to say, "Oh, yaar, kuch nahi hota hai, koi baat nahi, koi pata chal gaya to kya ho gaya." But they've all changed their tunes, because over the period in the last 2-3 years, all of them have had a single experience like that. And I've started telling them that, even secretly, don't search for stuff like sexy underwear or whatever on the internet, because the next time you're logged in front of somebody else, those are the ads you're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, they don't leave. I researched on Ritu Kumar and it's not leaving me past 3 months. Everywhere I go, Ritu Kumar pops up. And I was thinking everywhere people go to travel, Kesari should pop up.
Why don't you retain?
Thank you.
Why don't you retain Vikram as a Kesari propagation consultant? He'll do it for you beautifully.
Neeru has a question.
Okay,
Vikram, I have a
Thank
question.
you so much.
Now tell me how to, can you hear me? I will mute myself again. I can't help it. Can you tell me how to get hold of all the data my husband gets from his girlfriends?
Neeruji, it's good to know that he has a girlfriend.
So that's a question that I can't answer, because I think maybe my alliance with Anil might be as strong as my alliance with you. So,
Vikram, your connection.
I think bandwidth problem is there.
I think he's got disconnected.
Yeah. His connection is gone.
He doesn't want to answer this question.
Yes.
He doesn't want to answer
Because of
this
that.
question. So he went.
Rara on the prowl.
You put him in trouble, Neeru.
Vikram, unmute yourself and just come back.
Vikram is back.
Vikram, unmute.
Vikram is back.
Yeah, he's back.
Neeru gave me such a shock. I got disconnected.
Everybody was talking about that only.
Colonel Saab, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now there is not much time. So please excuse me. There must be some questions, but allow me to invite Lieutenant Sanjay Merchant to extend formal vote of thanks. To over to Sanjay ji.
Oh, again, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vikram, on, I'll keep it short and sweet, hopefully. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Pune Riverside, we would like to thank our very own member, Vikram ji. In fact, 16 years ago, he was the one who hooked me onto Gmail, as well as he put my website onto GoDaddy. So I can say that Vikram is responsible for all that what is happening now today in life. Yeah, and it was a wonderful talk, as there'll be a lot of questions which will still be there, Vikram. So expect a few personal messages to come to you. But on the whole, thanks a lot for educating us, and we hope that this recording of us will go viral, so that yeah, thank you very much.
Of course, thank you very much. And for part of the day, I would like to invite again Rotarian Vikram Puri. So over to Vikram ji.
Okay, so that is something this time I thought that it should be, apt and based on what we spoke. The freedom to be only inoffensive is no freedom at all.
Great, thank you, thank you. For cracking the joke, I would like to quickly invite Lieutenant Sandeep Bass. So over to Sandeep.
Good morning, everybody. It was a wonderful talk to Vikram. I'm so really very inspired, but more scared now than ever. And it's so very difficult. It's such a tight rope that which way do you go? I mean, either way, either you don't avail of all the services which are available to you, or you sacrifice all your privacy, all your information, all your critical information with Google and everybody else on the same plate, of course. So when Jailam was saying something, I got reminded of this joke and I put it up. It's slightly longish, but I think it's very apt and appropriate for the moment. So I'm just going to read it because I can't remember everything and say that. So there is this guy who calls up Gordon's Pizza, and he wants to order pizza, of course. So the caller says, "This is Gordon's Pizza." So the reply comes from the other side, "No, sir, this is Google Pizza." He says, caller says, "I must have dialed a wrong number. I'm so sorry." The reply comes, "No, sir, Google bought Gordon's Pizza last month." Caller, "Okay, I would like to order a pizza." So the reply comes, "Do you want your usual, sir?" Caller, "My usual? Do you know me?" The reply comes, "According to our caller ID data sheet, the last 12 times you called, you ordered an extra large pizza with 3 cheeses, sausages, pepperoni, mushrooms, and meatballs on a thick crust." Caller, "Okay, that's what I want." So the reply comes, "May I suggest that this time you order a pizza with ricotta, arugula, sun-dried tomatoes, olives on a whole wheat, gluten-free, thin crust." Caller, "What? I detest vegetables." Reply comes, "Your cholesterol is not good, sir." Caller, how in the hell do you know that?" Reply comes, "Well, we cross-reference your home phone number with your medical records, and we have the results of your blood test for the last 7 years. Caller, "Okay, but I do not want your rotten pizza, vegetable pizza. I already take medication for my cholesterol." Reply comes, "Excuse me, sir, but you have not taken your medication regularly. According to our database, you purchased a box of 30 cholesterol tablets once at drug such and such store 4 months ago." Caller, "Okay, I bought more from another drugstore. So that doesn't show on our credit card records." Well, I paid in cash, but you did not withdraw enough cash. And if you've been using money which you have not declared, that's against the law. "Oh, I have other sources." It's not showing, so that must be against the law. What the hell? I'm sorry, sir. use such information only the story helping you. Well, enough already. I'm sick of death, sick to death of Google, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, and all the others. I'm going to island without internet, cable TV, where there's no cell phone service and no one to watch or spy on me. The reply comes, I understand, sir, but you need to renew your passport. It's been expired for more than 6 months now. So this is the state of life now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandeep bhai. You have, in fact, you have cracked the joke on the line of the talk of the day, and in that alignment. So that has been very interesting. Thank you very much. Not taking much time, just 1 minute, last 1 minute. The next Wednesday, 5th May, we have Neha Sinha, and she is going to speak on a very, very interesting topic: dementia versus age-related forgetfulness. And this is very relevant, for all of us. So please join in large number. What to say about the COVID situation? One more, we have tied up with the Connecting Trust, and in previous meetings we have in fact introduced them also. The name of that project is Man Saksham Yuva. So we are looking to empower the teachers, students, and their parents through peer educator program to our 3 interactive schools, taking Sanjeevani Riverside and Connecting Trust as a partner. So that first program is going to happen, on 3rd and 4th. We will sharing the link with you, and I'm very happy to share with you that Man Saksham Yuva is going to be spearheaded by Group Captain Ashwini Kumar Bhaku, and they have 2 wings. One is awareness program about the wellness, that is going to be headed by Umesh Kumar Jalan, and the peer educator program is going to be that Murtuza Cherawala. So I am very grateful to all these 3 Group Captain Ashwini Bhaku, Umesh Kumar Jalan, Murtuza Cherawala, for owning this and taking forward. So please join on 3rd and 4th if you have time. That's going to be very interesting for the teachers of Calcutta School, Gyan Bharati School, and 50 teachers are going to join. And 5th for this talk. So not it's already too late. So please allow me to end the meeting, and stay healthy, happy, safe, and blessed. So do I have permission, Vikramji, to end the meeting?
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a very interesting talk. Thank you.